Onion Cycles podcast is about thought provoking, emotion evoking, action driven, step by step guidance to explore the unique, glorious, and wonderful ocean of your being. Because healing is a multi layered process of getting to know oneself. Become the self empowered empiric researcher by discovering the unique layers of your existence. With your host, Nadine Alma, welcome to the Holistic Healing Hub. Welcome to the Onion Cycles podcast. Hello and a warm welcome back to all of you out there, my beloved fellow healing integrating onions. Welcome back to another episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for choosing this time to spend it with yourselves in exploring the beautiful mosaic of fragments and different sides and aspects that make up the gorgeousness that is you. Today we are at story 41, episode 43, the tyranny of how. Now, this phrase, I believe, was coined by Tony Robbins. This episode that I created from it, heavily inspired by him too. And we also have a pinch of Dean Graziosi in it as well. He, I believe, is a good friend of Tony's, and the workshop I did with Tony, part of it was a guest speaker, Dean Graziosi. And I want to start off by saying that I wanted to do this for quite some time, and I never really felt like I could do it, to be honest. Because as it so happens, I felt like it is such an important topic, but I have nothing to say about it because I don't really experience the tyranny of how in my life so far. I think that the closest that I come to experiencing what it feels like is connected to my procrastination. So, for example, if I have a task that I want to accomplish, then I sort of struggle with taking small steps towards completing it and then get overwhelmed. So, the tyranny of how to me is sort of related to procrastination in that sense. And any other time when there was a decision to be made, I sort of was thrown into it, and there was no time to let the tyranny of how sort of get a grip on me. Therefore, I always, I thought I'll just move it back and move it back. But to be honest, it feels like now is the time to do it, especially since we've done so much work on our identity and beliefs and grieving the parts of us and the people and the places and the situations and the parts that we leave behind. I felt it's time for a new beginning. It just feels like everything's new and shiny. And that is when the tyranny of how sometimes takes over. I feel like the tyranny of how, in essence, can be described as an overwhelm, and therefore that's how I related to it. However, if you feel called to share, we always say sharing is caring, right? Leave a comment below, and maybe you want to share your story on how you would interpret the tyranny of how and how this played out in your own life and what you did to overcome it or to befriend it or how you dealt with it, basically. So I think that the description of myself as the closest to coming to the tyranny of how being my procrastination, I also feel like what is important to mention here is the essence that Tony Robbins just put perfectly when he said, if I can't, then I must. So, for the last 7 to 8 years in my own healing journey, whenever there was an if, whenever there was something within me that wanted to do something, I always vowed that I would never again in my life let it come to be a what if again. So I'd rather do it than think back and ask myself what would have happened if I'd actually done it. And the if I can't, then I must plays into this. Because whenever someone, even myself, and more often than not myself, tell me that I can't do something, then I immediately get that urge within myself. I think my family would say the rebellious side of me just says, no, no, I can't do this. If you say I can't, then I must do it. So, for the sake of our example of the tyranny of how today, I want you to remember that it is very important to sort of get into a mindset of if I can't, then I must. It, I feel like, is connected to the if you fear something, then it actually is probably very right for you to experience, to overcome it in a sense, to know that afterwards, looking back on it, you're like, well, if I can do that, what else can I do? And I feel like that is the only really healthy way to make this tyranny of how, if it plays a big part in your life, smaller. Because in essence, what you're teaching yourself is that you can actually do it and that there isn't even a question of how anymore. Personally, in my life, what I did when I was confronted with a decision that had to be made and I wasn't sure how to approach it or the little baby steps I should take to get into the right direction, I always came back to consistency. And when I say consistency, please, if you feel called to do so, listen to episode 1 where we dive into the topic of consistency. Because when I say consistency, that is very unique. That is, in essence, like everything we talk about in this podcast, very personal and an intimate way of getting to know yourself. What does consistency mean for you, to you, and how can you approach consistency from your own point of view? How does it fit into your life? How does it contribute or benefit you most advantageous, and not in a you have to do it that way, because there is, as I always say, no one shoe fits all, right? So the consistency that I approached was in the mornings before I did anything else except maybe drink water or walk with my dog and come back with a fresh mind, was write down an affirmation. Now, Tony Robbins also makes a distinction between incantation and affirmation. So he says an incantation is when you repeat a phrase with enough emotional intensity that you actually start believing it. It plays into the misconception of the law of attraction in the spiritual realms, where it's like, yeah, you just need to match the energy and attract it. You just need to want it a lot and then it will come into your life, versus what actually is there is the sending out the energy of, or matching the energy of what you actually want. Now, I'm by far nowhere near an expert on the law of attraction or of any of the 7 laws of the universe. But what I can say is that what I feel like Tony Robbins wants to emphasize by using the word incantation rather than affirmation is that there needs to be a genuine emotional connection. Like, you really need to tune into that feeling. How would you feel in the moment that this would be part of your life? How would you feel when you actually had the car, had the job, had the companion, had the friend, or whatever you wish for? Like, if you match the energy is with your feeling rather than with your thoughts. But for me, when I say I write down in the morning an affirmation, it basically means the same, because I try to have my energy frequency match what I send out, what I want to come back to me, what I want magnet, what I want to be the magnet, right, that attracts what I actually want to come into my life by sending out the energy that it's already there in my feeling in my heart, right? So consistently, emotionally, intensely enough, I am is the essence of what you'll become, right? So in the mornings, I would write my affirmation, just a couple of sentences, just really to prime me for what it is that this day should take me closer, a step closer to the objective, right? Never lose the objective. In the morning, I do that affirmation to really close in onto objective what I want. And then at nighttime, what I do is I'd sit down and journal about today and what steps I took to get closer to it. So, for an example, because I feel like it's very abstract to hear it like that, so I'll give you an example. I had that phase where I was trying to get closer to withdrawing my attachment to things from the outside in order to grow my deep trust and connection to me being a eternal being living the human experience. Like, I wanted to really not care what happened to me in the outside world and just see everything happening for me and bringing me a step closer to what is actually in alignment with me. So that said, what I would write down in a journal at the end of the day, I would say that a situation happened. Maybe my car broke down, but instead of feeling furious or disappointed or anxious or fearful, I would just basically use the time in a way that I found contributing then. So I would do a meditation, or I would do some work on the laptop, or I would just walk with my dog, or I would just, when I fancy it, just sit around, watch what happened around me, watch the people, watch nature, and not get in my head about what could happen to the car, if it would cost money that I don't have, or if I can, I don't know, make my way back home or whatever. Like, I would just stay in the present moment and accept the time that had been given to me in the form of my car breaking down, right? So in the journaling at evening, I would then reflect and tell myself, oh, well, you've been a little bit impatient at first and you had the nerves, but you actually took your time and worked through that, and etc., etc., like something like that. I hope that makes sense to you. So in essence, what my consistency looked like was doing something in the morning and doing something before sleep that made me not lose the objective or what of my aim, what I was trying to accomplish, right? So the tyranny of how then becomes very, very small, because it doesn't matter which steps you write on your to-do list or what you think you need to accomplish in a day. You are your own best friend, and you can sort of make adjustments according to what really benefits you, and over time get to know so many different layers of you, and so many different things come up and make you feel like you get to know yourself so much better. And by getting to know yourself better, you somehow also realize how much self empowerment there lies within taking the self responsibility to not be attached to the outside and focus on what's happening inside and how you want to deal, how you want to cope, etc. Right? So, the tyranny of how, as the headliner of this episode, sort of takes a step back when you focus on the very simple task ahead of you, that is being present and being in the now with yourself, to then actually eliminate perfection because that is an illusion. And you know that in every single phase of your life, even when you've thought something is perfect, a couple of days, weeks, months, years later, it's not perfect anymore. So it lies in the eye of the beholder what actually is perfect. So by getting to know yourself better, is what I'm trying to say, you eliminate perfectionism. You then realize that it's actually very simple and very easy by just not losing the objective and staying consistent in whatever way that looks to you, to taking steps closer to your objective, steps approaching your objective, and realizing that what Tony also said is complexity is the enemy of change. So it is very easy in the end, because the tyranny of how can be eliminated by easy steps, not actually thinking about the how, but just taking one step at a time and seeing what comes out of it. And now is the time, to everyone who tunes in for the first time. Normally, I don't go on tangents like this, and it's more structured, but this is a very abstract topic. So, just so you know, everything that we discuss in each episode is contained on the worksheet that can be downloaded for free on my website www.wunderfinder.org. And on those worksheets, we also have exercises. And these exercises are there because this podcast aims at, as I think, so I feel, so I act. Because in the action lies the magic that brings the change about. It's rolling up your sleeves and actually every single day doing something that gets you closer to your objective. Therefore, probably the whole podcast is an antagonist to the tyranny of how, because it's an action based program that tries to give you the tools and opportunity to get to know yourself and what works for you and what doesn't. The reason why I say that is because the last part of this episode is dedicated to the 3 exercises that will be on the worksheet of this week's episode. Now, exercise 1, 2, and 3 are all exercises that I, at some point or another, have tried out for myself. And I believe they do really work. So, for me at least, that is why I say it's a unique personal thing. So, everyone really needs to think about, how did you come about your habits and patterns? It's trying out new things and seeing if they work for you. So, try it out for yourself and then maybe share it with the community and tell us if it worked for you, and why, or if it didn't work for you, why not. So, exercise 1 of this week will be to identify the fear behind the task at hand. Why is it that you're actually fallen into the trap of the tyranny of how? Because basically, and we covered this in an early episode as well, basically every single fear, be it failure, rejection, hurting someone else, succeeding even, stems from 2 things. It's either I'm not enough or I won't be loved. And once you have identified that fear, you then turn that fear into power. And you'll do that by creating your own power mantra. So I love that, because usually we take the mantra of someone else, or we just write down something that has been given to us. But although I like to do that as well, when there is a really important thing that I want to accomplish, or that I want to, evolve from, so to speak, I sit down and I really intentionally write my own mantra that then becomes the anthem of the next couple of weeks or months, or however long I work on it, right? And the reason why I suggest or recommend you doing this exercise is because the fear within you holds you back and feeds the tyranny of how, feeds the procrastination. An example, personal example again, would be I was working on my sense of safety. So, a situation in my life as a freelancer very often is that there are no projects available, and then money slowly runs out. And especially if you're in that kind of profession, you'll never know when the next project comes around. It might as well be the end of your career. And I might do something wrong as well with my career that happens, but it keeps repeatedly coming up. And whenever it comes up, I had problems dealing with it, and I was really trapped in my fear. Basically, my fear that I'm not enough, I'm not good enough at what I do. So the last time this fear came around, I actually created a mantra around it concerning my own safety. And this mantra became my morning routine, and I would say it as slowly and as often and in accordance with my breathing as I needed to, until that tightness in my chest would lose. And that was priming me for a day where I still was able to receive and surrender and be open to opportunities, rather than letting that fear eat me up and close my systems down and hold me back from actually being able to get chances at getting a project, for example, because I wasn't sending out the energy. I didn't have the right attitude. That is exercise one, and it is really powerful, and I would recommend you do it with just a trial, just to see if it works for you. Now, the second exercise would be that realizing how much power you actually have, because you won't get stuck in the journey of how if you actually realize that you've done it before. And now I'm repeating myself, right? You are not afraid of something that you have done before. But most of the times we don't even realize how much we've already accomplished, because we're so connected to our inner critic, we're so connected to making ourselves small, that we never actually sit down and write about situations where we made the right decision, moved into the right direction, that actually brought about a positive impact in our own lives. So the second exercise focuses on exactly on that. Focuses on the past and what three decisions were that you made that impacted your life positively, that shaped your life, that shaped the trajectory of your life in a wonderful way. And now that writing that situation down, what follows is writing down what you learn about yourself and actually what the impact was. Why are you happy that you did it? What made you do it? Looking back on it, what did you learn about yourself? Realizing that you have so much more courage than you thought, so much more strength than you thought, or that you actually surrendered to vulnerability and accepted help. Could also be. Now, the reason why this exercise is so powerful is because never give in to the inner critic. Yes, you can befriend him, and it might be very challenging to do so, if I may say so myself. But he's right in the sense that he's just trying to keep us safe. He's just here to get us going. He's basically the one that says you can't, and then the other voice, the soul, if you want, within says, then I must. So he's actually a friend as well. He's just a friend that sort of gives you a push once in a while, or too often. All depends on the relationship you build with him. But seeing as the inner critic is often the first voice that comes into our head and feeds the tyranny of how, activating situations and decisions you made in your own terms and for your own merit that impacted your life positively makes you realize that it all lies within you. The outside experiences, they happen. There is nothing we can do, or a limited amount that we can actually influence the outside happenings around us, right? But what we do is totally up to us, and that opens up this space and place of freedom to really look deeply at how wonderful we are and how much we already did impact our own lives. And we do impact, it's either conscious or unconscious, but we do it nonetheless. So therefore, looking at it from a very conscious point of view and realizing that it's actually wonderful and beautiful how much we can impact our own decisions and therefore the trajectory of our whole life, and how that can accumulate into so much positivity even if at first we didn't see it. That exercise is also really nice if you have a situation in your life when you think like, whoa, that was just most horrible horrific experience, but could I maybe see something that changed me for the better? What did I learn from that that now I do differently and that actually contributed to my life in a positive way? So the third point in that exercise too would then be, what are three decisions you can make today that would bring you closer to your goal? Because your objective is still there. What do you want to accomplish, right? Doesn't need to be something material, can be something within. Like I said, I've worked on patience, I've worked on universal trust, right? It's not always, I didn't always work on something material. But what could it be? What would three decisions be that you can act on right now? And whether they are habits that you want to establish, or whether it be something like one call that will then change your life forever. But what would three decisions be that bring you closer to realizing that shaping your life as a self-empowered researcher is about self-responsibility, and it is about bringing you closer to your goal through your own choices and decisions? And we are at exercise 3. And that is probably the most powerful of all, because to be quite honest, I only managed to actually achieve it once. I don't know why I have so much trouble doing this exercise, but ever since I did hear from it from Dean Graziosi, I was like, well, that's easy. And then I sat down doing it and I was like, well, that's not easy at all. So I only achieved a result once. And if you fare better, please let us know, because that is so wonderful. What I'm talking about is the what is your why exercise. Why is it important? Well, apart from fear, what also keeps us in the tyranny of how is that we don't know what our motivation is. Like, we just think, oh, I want to have that, I want to do that, I want to be that. But why? Why? Is it a why that comes from someone else, or is it a why that really comes from the very source and essence of your existence? Because that is where it needs to come from for you to be consistent with the efforts that it needs to have to get there, right? The what is your why exercise seems very simple. Let me just break it down. You write down your goal, then you ask yourself why, then you write the answer, then you ask yourself why again, and do ask yourself again, 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 until you ask yourself 7 times why. So, for example, you might start out with, I want to found an off grid, intentional spiritual community on the shores of the ocean. Why? When you give your answer, then you ask why, and then you give your answer, and 7 times why down the line, you realize that what you're actually trying to do is build a system where you actually feel like you really 100% fit into and belong. That is what I mean by the only exercise I ever realized that it works. Every other time I tried it out, I couldn't get beyond 4 whys, and then I was like, well, that's why, and I couldn't go on. So I feel like it's a very challenging exercise. My beloveds, that's all I want to say for today. I am so curious. I hope this episode was of service to you. I hope the exercises and my rambles did something, contribute something to your journey. And with all of that said, I send you from my little corner of the world all the love right to yours. I thank you so much for your time. I thank you for your energy. I thank you for your trust. I do see you. I do love you very much. And until next time, my beloved fellow healing integrating onions.